Well, we're barely 2 weeks into Pope Leo XIV's papacy, but our next guest has already written a new biography to help us learn more about our new Pope. Dr. Matthew Bunson is Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. For the past 30 years, he's been active in Catholic social communications, including writing, editing, and teaching on a variety of topics related to church history, the papacy, the saints, and Catholic culture. He is the author or co-author of over 50 books, including his latest. I hope he doesn't have a cramp in his hand from writing this quickly. It's called Leo XIV, Portrait of the First American Pope. Welcome back to the Busted Halo Show, Dr. Matthew Bunson.
It's great to be with you. I always love being a guest on your show, and I find it impossible to believe that we were in Rome for that amount of time and somehow did not end up sharing a bowl of pasta somewhere.
I know. I remember seeing you like a few rooftops over, when all the media is doing these interviews and the cameras are up there. And you certainly had plenty of time on the TV, and EWTN did great coverage. I mean, a lot of people have mentioned that to us. It was quite an experience being over there. Did you find?
It really was to fly out on the day that Pope Francis passed away. So basically the first flight out of D.C. To Rome, so landed on the 22nd of April, and had the privilege of spending all that time in Rome, which is always a joy just in itself. But then to be able to cover the conclave, I actually got back here last Friday evening. So it was the longest time I'd certainly spent in Rome, but boy, what an experience for all of us.
Well, and I would imagine, like we have heard about coverage on the Catholic channel, that this opportunity, when a lot of the eyes of the world, even folks that aren't maybe necessarily practicing their faith as much, turn to the Catholic Church and turn to media outlets like our own, we get a lot of people kind of for the first time tuning in and connecting and maybe liking what they hear or what they see, or maybe they feel a little convicted or the Spirit's stirring in their heart a little bit. I bet we got a lot of new listeners and viewers for both EWTN and the Catholic channel over the last month.
I think that's a very safe assumption. And I know that we follow Google Trends and a lot of what's happening in social media and elsewhere, but it's now almost not a meme, but it's hilarious that I think the Google search is up 30% of people who are just typing in the question, how do I become Catholic? Or what is being Catholic? So this is a really important moment for Catholics, of course, as here we are covering the election, the first funeral of Pope Francis, and then the election of our new Holy Father. But this is an opportunity to evangelize, but also to introduce a lot of people to Catholicism who otherwise really just had either no interest or just hadn't had that opportunity to have that encounter. And they were turning out in huge numbers, I know, for all of us. It's also a little bit of a recognition of the sort of fragmentation in a lot of media today, where they don't have the kinds of experts that they did not that many years ago. So they were turning to us for advice, but also just to fill the airtime on their different shows, because they turn to us because they think we know one or two things about the papacy.
A lot of our regular listeners said because they wanted to see the visuals, they turned on something like CNN or Fox News, but they turned the volume down and listened to EWTN or the Catholic channel.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that the great post a couple of people posted on X over those days that nobody does aesthetics like the Catholics.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Dr. Matthew Bunson, our guest here in the Busted Halo Show, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. You mentioned that a lot of searches are up. How do I become Catholic? There's some Googling about Catholic stuff. I was also seeing a bump. Those Augustinians, they're getting a few vocations, I think, out of this.
They are. Plus, I was talking with some school kids today because they came for a tour for our facilities here in D.C., and they are now all very interested in Augustine of Hippo.
Suddenly, yeah. Who is this guy?
Yeah, right, exactly. Who is Augustine, and does he have anything to do with hippos?
Right. And why don't we pronounce it like the Florida city?
Right. But exactly. This is a great moment for all of us to introduce people to the faith at a time, in so many ways, where you don't have a lot of positive news or positive presentations of Christianity in general and Catholicism in particular.
But I think something that translates even to almost all of our listeners, it's not just a moment for like you and I who have media presence. I mean, a lot of people are going to have friends, family member, coworkers asking them stuff and like, oh, Catholic Church, hey, you got a new pope. So don't just assume that an innocent comment like, hey, I see you got an American pope is not necessarily something deeper and God working in somebody's heart. And any of you out there could be the opportunity for somebody to connect with the church. So.
Yeah, and I was hearing from people from all over the world, as you can imagine, because we had literally I think it was the day of the white smoke, we had about 3 million views just on YouTube, and that's views. So we have no idea how many people, how many schools and everything else. But I was hearing from people, and they were asking questions like, I haven't been back to the church in years, but this whole journey of Pope Francis's death, and then all the way to Pope Leo XIV suddenly appearing on the loggia. This is transformational for a lot of people, and it gave them that encouragement to come back to the faith, or really to start exploring what it is that God is calling them to do in their lives.
Our guest is Dr. Matthew Bunson. He's the Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. And I was going to make it my first question, so I've really pushed this far down the page. He's got a brand new book called Leo XIV, Portrait of the First American Pope. Did you just take no dose and stay up for 2 weeks? And how do you have a book so soon? A biography, no less.
Well, I've been blessed over the years. This is, I think, my third conclave. And so I wrote a similar quick bio of Joseph Ratzinger when he became Benedict XVI, which itself was a challenge because he was one of the great theologians of the 20th century.
Yes.
Yeah. So how you even get started on that? I'm trying to remember. It was a long time ago, 20 years ago. Then I did something similar for Pope Francis in 2013. So I had a rough idea of what a book like this entails. And we had, over the months leading up to the conclave, with the declining health of Pope Francis, we had a pretty good idea that at some point we would be in this situation.
You can get some preparatory work done ahead of time.
Right, exactly. And sort of building dossiers on people. And I have to say, in all honesty, that when Robert Prevost was brought to Rome, plucked seemingly out of absolute obscurity in a diocese in Peru, and then named to the head of the dicastery for bishops, one of the most important offices of the church, and then the next day is made a cardinal, it sort of ends up on your radar.
You start taking some notes, I see.
You might need to fatten the dossier on this guy.
Let's see what else we got.
And then, let's get some old pictures on this guy just in case.
Just in case, yeah. And the more you studied him, the more interesting he became. And then when I arrived on the morning of the 22nd, as I was saying, and you start having these conversations with people that I know in Rome, and they were asking questions. So what do you know about this Cardinal Prevost?
Right.
Because we have been hearing his name quite a bit. And as we looked more closely, the cardinals had a list of things that they were looking for. And he seemed to check every possible box except, and this is what everyone assumed, the insurmountable obstacle of being an American. Because everyone said, no, there's no way an American could be elected pope.
So Brett and I were imagining that when the teams are in the Super Bowl and in advance they had to print up all those T-shirts and caps ahead of time, do you probably have a few other books that are now on the shelf for a while about some of the other contenders?
Happily
Maybe.
no.
Notes anyway. You got some notes.
Wow, really? Oh, geez. I would have thought the top 5 guys are about 3/4 through their biographies.
Well, I mean, some of them we've known for a long time.
Sure.
Cardinal Pietro Parolin is a known quantity. If you follow this sort of stuff obsessively, and I do.
You do.
Then you have a few others like Cardinal Tagle, who's been around for a long time, is well known, well respected. Matteo Zuppi of Bologna. The one that I think people really were intrigued by, and he's a fairly new addition, is Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the Latin patron of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
In part because of the things he's done, who he is, and I think it was Father Dwight Longenecker, the great blogger and person on social media, who made the observation that we all expected a pizzaballa, but we ended up with a Chicago deep dish.
That's right.
There you go.
The other
Those
thought
are
we had is that since it was portrait of the first American pope and it only took you about a week to do it, it literally was just a portrait of him.
just a picture. Yeah.
Right. Maybe like fancy words of,
Well, that
of
would have
Pope
been easier.
Leo. Yeah.
Everybody buys it. They're like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, well, it does say
part of it-
portrait. Ah, dang, they got
Well,
it
you
again.
hit on something really important, though, because the word portrait was very deliberate. That what we wanted to offer to readers was a snapshot or portrait into the life, the influences, especially what shaped him. And then where do we think, based on the things that he said, especially in these early days, that we think he may be headed? And I have to say that he has been so clear, so dynamic, and so in many ways specific about his concerns coming in, that I think we have a pretty good idea of him in a similar way that we did in 2013 with Pope Francis, where many of the things that he was doing in those first days, those first few weeks, really laid out almost programmatically what he was going to do for the next 12 years. And I have to say that if that's the case with Pope Leo the 14th, I think we are going to have a very fascinating and significant pontificate.
Dr. Matthew Bunson is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show. He is the Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News and very quick biography writer. Leo the 14th, Portrait of the First American Pope, is a brand new book. I mean, available now?
It is. Yep.
Yeah, that's
You
what I
can
thought.
go on to Amazon.com.
I've got a copy of it in front of me, so I figured, wow,
bless you.
it's pretty impressive.
And then also at the EWTN.com, of course. But obviously Amazon is a great resource for people to find books.
Now, we're all in different places. You're coming to us from Washington, D.C. I'm here in New York at the Paul's Fathers Mother Church. Chris and my producers in Cleveland. Brett is in New Orleans, Louisiana. And New
I saw
Orleans
the
is they're all getting pretty excited about Pope Leo because he's got some connections to the Crescent City, right?
Yes, he does. On his mother's side, from New Orleans, has a Creole background. And I would note too that you have the banner of the New Orleans Saints behind you.
Oh, good job.
And that is also one of the key elements of Pope Leo's coat of arms.
Oh, right, the fleur-de-lis.
Yeah. He has a fleur-de-lis in
What?
the upper left corner of his coat of arms. It's part of his. I don't think he's a Saints fan. He's a known White Sox fan.
It's all right. Different sports. You can
And
switch.
I've talked, I think, at some point
Okay.
about Michael Jordan.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
the
from
Blessed Mother
Chicago.
is very important to him. So you're halfway there with your banner.
Oh, I
And so
love it.
the fleur-de-lis, which is really, it's kind of a stylized version of a lily, which represents the Blessed Mother. That's why he's got it on his
That's
coat
right.
of arms,
Yeah,
right?
he has we're still in the process of exploring some of that, and I think he will too. But we could see that his great devotion to the Blessed Mother. He has gone several times now to Santa Maria Maggiore, first to say sort of farewell to Pope Francis, who made him a cardinal. Then he went back this last weekend for the Salus Populi Romani, one of these great icons of the Blessed Mother. He has gone out to a shrine for Our Lady of Good Counsel, which is one of the great patrons of the Augustinian order, especially in Italy. And he has spent some time out there. So that's sort of the new image of the Blessed Mother that I think is going to play a role in his pontificate. So there is that great devotion. And then on the other part of his coat of arms, in the bottom right, is a traditional symbol of the Augustinian order itself, which is a heart of flame pierced by an arrow, the great piercing of love. But it's resting also on a book, the book of the Gospel. So it's the idea of the heart and the mind. And he is, as he said on the very day of his election, he is the son of Augustine.
Yeah.
And you can see that right in two things, in the coat of arms, but then even in his motto that he took as Pope, in Illo Uno Unum, which is from Augustine's commentary on Psalm 127, in which in Christ we are one. And so I think he's taken that theme of unity in Christ and made it one of the hallmarks. That he's going to be one of the pillars of his pontificate.
Well, and it seems, I mean, obviously we can infer a lot and pundits can talk a lot, and our experience of American Catholicism is certainly through our lens, which is different than some other parts of the world. But it does seem like he's been intentional about really kind of trying to, I don't want to say appeal, but trying to connect with people that might identify themselves as different parts of the church, and really identifying with Pope Benedict and John Paul II and Francis all at the same time, and kind of seemingly trying to draw dots of continuity. And as you just said, his coat of arms and his motto is about unity and unifying the church in Christ. So
That's
seems
exactly
like
right.
that's a direction or an agenda that he might have, and might be the guy to do it.
Yeah, as you say, I use the term in the book that he is an integrator. He is integrating so many of the elements of previous pontificates, the most recent ones especially. So Pope Francis, of course, he's talked about Evangelii Gaudium, he's talked about Francis, but he's also quoted Benedict, he's quoted John Paul II, he's quoted Paul VI, he's quoted the Second Vatican Council. And then he has sprinkled his homilies and speeches, not just with Augustine, but he is very deep into patristics, so the fathers of the church. He's had some breathtakingly and delightfully obscure references, such as the doctor of the church, St. Ephraim the Syrian.
This is
as
clearly
well
a theologian thing. I love the references.
Yes, it's right. But I mean, these are great references to put in because it establishes this, as you said, the word continuity. He's trying to pull all of this together, but he's also building bridges. And I think you said something really important, Father, and that is that pulling these experiences of the universal church. He grew up in Chicago, but ended up serving for decades in Peru as head of the Augustinians. He traveled multiple countries, having those experiences, and then he goes to Rome. So he's a bridge builder, and he's actually used that phrase in the classic word itself, pontifex. He does see himself as a builder of bridges, both to the world and in that unity, but also within the church at a time when I think a lot of us could see that there are in some quarters of the church serious divisions. But he's anchored all of it in that phrase, in Christ we are one. The very first thing he said when he was out on the loggia, peace be with you. But it isn't just this idolized idea of peace. It's the peace that you can only find from the risen Christ. And he said that outright.
And it's the same thing Jesus said when he first appeared.
Exactly.
After his
That
resurrection.
helps.
It does help when you're quoting Jesus, yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's so much more, and there'll obviously be more written. There'll be other biographies, but the first one is Leo XIV, Portrait of the First American Pope, by our guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson from EWTN News. Thank you for, I'm sure, working around the clock to get this out and in our hands, and I bet people are snapping it up.
They are. It's been a great response to it, and it's a privilege to work on it and to give this as a service to readers. And I think there's a lot to learn about Leo, but there's also going to be many years ahead of us, I pray, to learn from him. And I love doing your show, as you know, so it's a great pleasure to be with you again.
Thank you. Well, we'll put a link on our radio blog, bustedhalo.com/radio. We'll link to EWTN so Amazon doesn't take all the money. They take a big piece. And so check it out. The first biography of Pope Leo XIV. Dr. Bunson, thanks a lot for joining us.
Take care. God bless.